Picture this. It's 5 a.m. The prison corridor is completely silent except for footsteps, slow, deliberate, unhurried. A broad-shouldered man in a white shirt, black tailcoat, and white gloves walks toward a wooden block. He adjusts his top hat, he checks his blade, then he nods to the guards. No drama, no hesitation. This was not a soldier, not a torturer, not a war criminal. He was a man with a government contract, a fixed fee per execution, and a Bible verse ready for anyone who questioned him. His name was Karl Gröpler, and between 1906 and 1937 he officially beheaded at least 144 people. For the Kaiser, for the Weimar Republic, and then for Adolf Hitler's Third Reich. He executed murderers, communists, aristocrats, and one of the most sadistic serial killers in European history. And when it was all over, and Germany paid him to disappear, this is exactly the kind of story that gets buried. The Untold Wars exists to dig it back up. Subscribe right now and hit that notification bell, because we are just getting started, the world he was born into. Franz Friedrich Karl Gröpler was born on February 22, 1868 in Magdeburg, a city sitting along the Elbe River in the heart of Prussia, a military and industrial powerhouse that would later anchor the unified German Empire of 1871. His father, Heinrich Gröpler, worked as a railway labourer. His mother, Augusta, kept the household. It was a working-class upbringing in a city that smelled of coal smoke and river water, disciplined, modest, and hard. The boy who grew from that environment became, by all physical accounts, an imposing figure, broad shoulders, had a reddish moustache trimmed with precision, hair clipped close in strict military fashion. He looked like a man who had made his decisions and stopped reconsidering them. His early career told a different story, though. Karl Gröpler drifted. He trained first as a musician, a fact that sits strangely against everything else about him. Then he spent 5 years as a postal employee. After that, he became a horse butcher and eventually launched a steam laundry business in Magdeburg. It failed to generate enough income. He was a working-class man in an industrial city, looking for stable employment. What he found instead was one of history's most unusual professions. Gröpler entered the Prussian justice system quietly, initially as chief assistant to Lorenz Schwyz, the principal Prussian state executioner. He learned the mechanics, the protocols, the precise physical techniques that the work demanded. In 1906, the reigning Prussian executioner, Alwin Engelhardt, was abruptly dismissed, not for brutality or failure, but for financial irregularities in his accounting. The state needed a replacement immediately. Gröpler stepped forward. From that day, he carried 2 tools of his trade. The first was the Richtbeil, the hand axe, a specialized execution instrument used in German-speaking territories for centuries. It required the condemned to kneel with their neck extended over a wooden block, and the executioner to deliver a single precise downward stroke, followed by a drawing motion toward the body. Done correctly, it was immediate. Done incorrectly, it was catastrophic. The second was the Fallbeil, the guillotine, the mechanical blade that had become the modern standard for state executions in Germany. Faster, more consistent, and less dependent on the executioner's physical strength and precision on any given day. Gröpler was proficient with both. Here is where Karl Gröpler becomes genuinely fascinating and genuinely unsettling. He was not a cold, detached bureaucrat performing a technical function. He was a deeply ritualized man who built his identity entirely around the solemnity of what he did. For every single execution, without exception, he dressed in full ceremonial attire. White shirt, waistcoat, tailcoat, top hat, white gloves. The outfit came from an older tradition, a time when executioners in Germany and Prussia were considered official state figures, almost priestly in their function. By the early 20th century, most officials wanted him to drop the theatrics and dress practically. Gröpler refused every time. He was also openly, sincerely religious. On record before one execution, he told a prison officer directly, "I believe in God. Without that belief, I could not do this work." He cited biblical law, specifically the commandment that the shedding of innocent blood requires justice, to frame each execution not as killing, but as a divine obligation fulfilled through the authority of the state. This was not performance. Every account of Gröpler suggests he meant every word of it. In April 1924, the Prussian government formalized his role with a binding contract, making him the sole executioner for all of northern Germany. His monthly salary was fixed at 136 gold marks, approximately $1,300 in today's value, supplemented by per-execution fees and payments for his team of assistants. He was, professionally speaking, in a stable position. Then the Weimar Republic's political debates around abolishing capital punishment began cutting into his workload. Executions declined sharply through the late 1920s. Gröpler went months without a contract assignment. He faced genuine financial hardship. Then 1933 arrived. Before we reach the Nazi years, one execution demands its own chapter. Between 1929 and 1930, the city of Düsseldorf lived in genuine terror. A serial killer was moving through its streets with a precision and cruelty that baffled investigators. His name was Peter Kürten, and the press named him the Vampire of Düsseldorf. And unlike most sensational tabloid labels, this one was not much of an exaggeration. Kürten attacked men, women, and children. His methods included strangulation, stabbing, bludgeoning, and arson. In several cases, he was found to have consumed his victim's blood. He operated for over a year before his capture, and the full scope of his crimes, which stretched back decades, shocked even the detectives who had been hunting him. His trial in 1931 drew international press coverage. 9 counts of murder, 7 counts of attempted murder. The court deliberated and sentenced him to death 9 times over, once for each confirmed killing. Public reaction was not grief, it was relief. On July 2, 1931, inside Cologne's Klingelputz prison, Karl Gröpler carried out Peter Kürten's execution by guillotine. The man who had terrorized an entire German city for over a year was dead before most of Düsseldorf had eaten breakfast. In a strange footnote that says something profound about Kürten's psychology, when a prison psychiatrist asked him before his execution whether he had any final wish, Kürten replied, "Tell me, after the blade falls, will I still be able to hear the blood running for a moment?" Karl Gröpler gave him his answer without words. On January 30, 1933, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany by President Paul von Hindenburg. Within weeks, the political machinery of the Third Reich began reshaping every institution in Germany, including its courts. Capital punishment, which had nearly disappeared under Weimar, surged back immediately, and political enemies were prosecuted under new emergency laws. Convictions came fast, sentences came faster. Gröpler renewed his contract in February 1933. His new annual salary was 1,500 Reichsmarks, roughly equivalent to $11,400 today, plus 50 Reichsmarks per execution, approximately $380 in current value. After years of financial strain, the new regime had made his profession viable again. In April 1933, he beheaded convicted murderer Albert Klug in Zwickau using the hand axe, his first execution under the new government. Then came May 19, 1934, and one of the most politically loaded days of his career. In Hamburg, Gröpler executed 4 men: Jonny Dettmer, the acknowledged leader of the Rote Marine, the Red Marine, a communist naval resistance organization, alongside Alfred Werenberg, Hermann Fischer, and Arthur Schmidt. All 4 had been convicted under Nazi law for political subversion. An eyewitness account preserved in German legal records described the execution of Dettmer in clinical detail. The condemned man was positioned. Gröpler raised the Richtbeil. He let gravity do most of the work, and then drew the blade cleanly toward himself in the single practiced motion he had refined over nearly 3 decades. The stroke was complete in under a second. February 18, 1935, Berlin Plötzensee Prison. 2 women knelt at the execution block within hours of each other. The first was Baroness Benita von Falkenhayn, daughter of Erich von Falkenhayn, the former chief of the German General Staff during World War I. The second was her close friend Renate von Natzmer, a former military intelligence clerk. Both had been convicted of espionage and treason by the Nazi People's Court, accused of passing sensitive German military information to a Polish intelligence contact. Their trial was conducted under the full weight of Nazi judicial authority, offering minimal room for defense. Karl Gröpler carried out both executions with the hand axe. The international press exploded. The beheading of two women, one of them the daughter of a legendary German military figure, by axe inside a Nazi prison, sent shockwaves through Europe and the United States. Foreign correspondents described the executions in visceral terms. The diplomatic fallout was immediate. Adolf Hitler personally intervened. Within weeks, he issued a formal decree. All executions throughout the Reich were henceforth to be carried out by hanging or guillotine. The Richtbeil, the hand axe, was permanently retired from German state executions. Karl Gröpler had just performed the last axe execution in German history. By 1936, Gröpler's long career was beginning to crack under its own weight. Following one execution in which the axe struck above the intended point, a significant procedural failure in a trade where precision was everything, officials filed formal complaints. Investigators suspected alcohol consumption may have been a factor. The whisper network inside the German justice system grew louder. In 1937, after approximately 31 years of service and no fewer than 144 confirmed executions, Karl Gröpler was compulsorily retired. His pension was inadequate. A foreign publisher approached him shortly afterward with a substantial offer to tell his life story in full. Names, executions, everything. It would have resolved his financial problems permanently. German authorities blocked the deal before any agreement could be signed. They almost certainly increased his pension as incentive to stay silent. A man holding 30 years of institutional memory, including the political executions of 1934 and the deaths of aristocratic women in 1935, was a reputational liability the Reich could not afford to have talking publicly. Gröpler returned to Magdeburg. He kept quiet. He disappeared from public record entirely. In 1945, the Soviet Red Army advanced into Magdeburg. Karl Gröpler, now 77 years old, was arrested at his home by Soviet military authorities. The charges were never formally published, but the connection to the 1934 communist executions in Hamburg was almost certainly central to the arrest. The men he had beheaded, Dettmer, Werenberg, Fischer, Schmidt, were now martyrs of anti-fascist resistance in the Soviet political framework. He died in Soviet custody on January 30, 1946. The date carries a weight that history rarely acknowledges. January 30, 1933 was the day Hitler became Chancellor. The day that reactivated Gröpler's career and set the final chapter of his life in motion. January 30, 1946 was the day he died, 13 years later in a prison cell on the other side of the war. He had served the German Empire, the Weimar Republic, and the Third Reich. He had executed a serial killer who terrorized a nation, communists killed for their politics, aristocrats convicted of espionage, and ordinary murderers whose names no one remembers. He dressed identically for all of them: white shirt, tailcoat, top hat, other white gloves. Karl Gröpler was the last of Germany's traditional executioners. He did not choose the regimes he served. He chose the contract, the ritual, and the conviction that what he was doing was sanctioned by law and, as he believed with complete sincerity, by God. Whether history agrees with that conviction is a question each viewer must answer for themselves. That is the true story of Karl Gröpler, the man who carried out Germany's final axe execution, who beheaded the Vampire of Düsseldorf, and who died forgotten in a Soviet cell. The Untold Wars covers stories exactly like this, accurate, complete, and unfiltered. If this episode opened your eyes to a piece of history you had never encountered before, subscribe right now, hit the bell. Share this video with someone who thinks they know World War II history. Drop a comment below. Do you think Gröpler was a professional doing a legal job, or something more troubling than that? We read every response. We'll see you in the next one.